Lauren is my name. I used to believe that I had it all figured out. A young boy, a spouse, and a solid position as deputy head of finance at a large corporation. Although we weren't wealthy, I believed that we were content. Tom, my spouse, was a salesman for electronics. Therefore, his income was inconsistent. He would receive a hefty wage in certain months and barely make ends meet in others. However, we managed to make it work. We had been accumulating money to purchase a house for 7 years. I was adamant even if it wasn't easy. We deposited every extra dime into our savings account. Instead of dining out, I would cook at home, clip coupons, and purchase generic brands. Sometimes Tom would complain, but I believed he understood. That Sunday afternoon, it all came crashing down. Once more, we browsed through real estate listings on the internet. Tom's eyes brightened as he gestured toward the television. "Lauren, have a look at this one. It's flawless." I took a closer look. I have to confess, it was very lovely, roomy, contemporary, and with a large backyard. But my heart fell when I saw the price tag. "We can't afford it, Tom. It's much beyond our means." We'd had this conversation before, so I was expecting him to sigh and go on. But something inside of him gave way this time. He said, slamming his laptop shut, "Of course we can't afford it. We never have enough money. You just keep saving, saving, saving." Now he stood up and paced the space. "For Jimmy's schooling in the home, but where's the payback, huh? When will we be able to truly appreciate life?" "Tom, calm down." No, I refuse to give up. "Lauren, I'm tired of this. Sick of living on a tight budget, tired of never traveling someplace pleasant, and tired of dressing in the same old clothing every year. I'm worthy of better than this. I ought to have a better spouse in life." His remarks felt like a blow to the face. Tears were prickling in my eyes and my cheeks were burning, but I forced myself to swallow and didn't let them fall. "Tom, please," I responded, attempting to seem nonchalant. "Just inhale deeply. We must exercise patience since we are nearly there with our savings. Just relax and let's have a conversation about this." I was mistaken to believe that by soothing him with my words, we might have a reasoned conversation. With a furious expression on his face, Tom walked out of the room, slamming the door so forcefully that the windows trembled. After Tom's tantrum, I was under the impression that things would improve, but I couldn't have been more mistaken. Tom returned home the following day, filled to the brim with expensive clothing and a brand new wristwatch. I looked at him, perplexed. "What's all this?" I inquired. With a daring sparkle in his eye, he shrugged. "Just taking care of myself." "Do you have an issue with that?" I bit my tongue so as not to incite another quarrel. However, things only grew worse in the next weeks. Tom began squandering his whole salary on costly electronics, upscale dining, and hangouts with his friends. I couldn't contain myself any longer as he was leaving the house that evening wearing a brand new suit. "Tom, how are our savings doing? The residence?" His face steely, he turned to face me. "Lauren, life is too short. I have finished putting money aside for an uncertain future. Right now, I want to live." "But what about Jimmy's education?" I applied pressure. Tom sneered. "I accomplished well despite my parents not being able to afford my schooling. He's eligible for loans and scholarships. Besides, there's no need to squander money buying a house. We can continue renting." I was conversing with someone I didn't know well. The man I married was not this one. Tom became increasingly extreme in his actions as the weeks stretched into months. He began going out late almost every night. He would occasionally have unexpected business trips on the weekends, which had never happened in his years of employment with the company. Additionally, living with him at home was like living with a continuous critic. At meals he would snap, "Do you have to chew so loudly?" He would remark, "That dress makes you look frumpy," while I was getting ready for work. He used to throw his dirty socks on the floor and grumble, "Can't you keep the house cleaner?" Every day. I could feel myself getting smaller and smaller beneath his relentless criticism. I made an effort to communicate with him and find out what had changed, but all he did was roll his eyes and turn to go. Half a year. 6 unpleasant, protracted months of this new normal. My life was so unlike the one I knew before. The cozy, loving house I believed we had created together had become unfriendly and icy. One evening, I finally had enough. Tom had just done giving me a hard time over the supper I had prepared, which was once his favorite. "Tom," I said, my voice quiet but firm, "I think we need to live separately for a while." I expected an argument, maybe even remorse. What I didn't expect was the look of relief that washed over his face. "Yeah," he said, nodding. "I think that's a good idea." His easy agreement felt like a punch to the gut, but it also confirmed what I had been fearing for months. The man I loved, the life we'd built together, was already gone. The days after Tom left were a strange mix of loneliness and peace. I told myself this separation was temporary, that Tom would realize what he was missing, face the harsh realities of life on his own, and come back appreciating everything we built together. I was so naive. It was a Tuesday evening when my phone started buzzing nonstop. At first, I ignored it, focusing on helping Jimmy with his homework. But when the notifications kept coming, I decided to check. The moment I opened my social media app, my heart stopped. There at the top of my feed was a photo that shattered my world. Tom, my husband, was standing on a yacht, his arm wrapped around a stunning blonde with legs that seemed to go on forever. They were both grinning, the blue sea stretching out behind them. But it was the caption that really got me. "Starting a new life." I retreated to the kitchen, my hands shaking as I scrolled through the comments. Friends, family, coworkers. Everyone was asking the same thing. "Who's that woman with Tom?" Then 5 days after the photo appeared, there was a knock at the door. I opened it to find Tom standing there, looking tan and happy, happier than I'd seen him in years. "We need to talk," he said, brushing past me into the house. I followed him into the living room, my heart pounding. "Tom, what's going on? Who was that woman in the photo?" He turned to face me, a smirk on his face that made my stomach turn. "That's Vanessa, my girlfriend." The room seemed to spin. "Girlfriend? But we're married." "We're just separated. Come on, Lauren." He cut me off. "Let's not pretend our marriage has been over for a long time. Vanessa and we've been together for 6 months now." 6 months. The timeline clicked into place. His sudden change in behavior, the late nights, the business trips. I felt sick. "She's rich," Tom continued, oblivious to my distress. "And fun. She doesn't pinch pennies or obsess over saving. She lives for today." Plus, he added with a cruel smile, "She's a hell of a lot more interesting and beautiful than you." I want to marry Vanessa, start fresh. I nodded slowly. In that moment, I realized our marriage had been over long before this conversation. Maybe it had been over the moment he'd slammed the door 6 months ago. "Okay," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "If that's what you want, we'll get a divorce." Tom looked surprised, like he'd expected a fight, but I was done fighting. As he left, already on the phone with his lawyer, I sank onto the couch. The divorce proceedings were a blur of paperwork and legal jargon. Tom and I agreed on joint custody of Jimmy. I wanted him to have both parents in his life, despite the mess we made of our marriage. But even with the divorce finalized, I was far from okay. The betrayal, the public humiliation, the sudden upheaval of my entire life. It all hit me like a ton of bricks. I found myself struggling to get out of bed in the morning, barely able to focus at work. That's when I decided to see a therapist. Dr. Reynolds was a kind older woman with gentle eyes. "Lauren," she said in our first session, "what you're feeling is normal. You've experienced a significant trauma. But you're here, and that's the first step towards healing." Those sessions became my lifeline. Slowly, with Dr. Reynolds' help, I started to process my emotions, to understand that Tom's actions were about him, not me. For Jimmy's sake, I pushed myself to heal, to move forward. I threw myself into my work, started exercising, even joined a support group for divorced women. Bit by bit, I felt myself emerging from the fog of depression. Then Tom married Vanessa. I tried to be happy for Jimmy. He seemed to like her well enough. But things started to change. It began innocently enough. Tom asked to have Jimmy for a weekend, an extra day here and there. I agreed, wanting to encourage their relationship. But soon, those weekends turned into weeks. "Jimmy," I asked one day, "don't you want to spend more time here at home?" He shrugged, not meeting my eyes. "Dad's place is more fun." That should have been my first warning sign, but I brushed it off, telling myself it was natural for a boy to want to spend time with his father. As the months went by, though, Jimmy spent less and less time with me. When he did come home, he was different, distant, and he always seemed to have new clothes, new toys, stories of exciting trips and adventures. Finally, after yet another weekend where Jimmy begged to stay at his dad's, I sat him down for a talk. "Honey, what's going on? Don't you like being here anymore?" Jimmy fidgeted, still not meeting my eyes. "It's just Dad and Mom let me do whatever I want." I echoed, confused. "Yeah, Vanessa, she buys me cool stuff all the time. We go to amusement parks and fancy restaurants. It's way more fun than here." His words felt like a slap in the face. "Jimmy, you know we can't afford that." "That's the problem," he burst out. "You never want to spend money on anything fun. It's always save this, budget that. Dad says you're stuck in the past, always worrying about the future instead of living now." Things spiraled quickly after that. Jimmy started refusing to come home at all. When he did, he'd complain constantly, comparing my modest home unfavorably to Tom and Vanessa's lavish lifestyle. The final blow came on a rainy Tuesday. I'd been trying for days to get Jimmy to come home for dinner. When he finally arrived, he took one look around our living room and smeared, "God, this place is like a village barn compared to Dad's house. I don't want to live here anymore." The months slipped by, each one harder than the last. I watched from the sidelines as my son grew up, becoming more and more distant. Every time I reached out, I was met with indifference or outright hostility. Then came the day that shattered what was left of my world. It was Jimmy's 14th birthday. I'd hoped, foolishly perhaps, that he might want to spend it with me. Instead, I got a phone call that changed everything. "Mom," Jimmy's voice was cold, detached. "I need to talk to you about something important." We met at a cafe, neutral ground. Jimmy sat across from me, looking more like a stranger than my son. Then he dropped the bomb. "I want you to give up your parental rights," he said, his voice steady. "Vanessa wants to adopt me." I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. "What, Jimmy, I'm your mother." "No," he cut me off. "Vanessa's my mom. She's been there for me. She understands me. She and Dad can give me the life I want." He hesitated, then plowed on. "She can't have kids of her own. I want to be her son legally." I sat there, stunned, as Jimmy laid out their plan. Tom and Vanessa had already spoken to a lawyer. All they needed was my signature. Over the next few weeks, Tom and Vanessa pressed hard. Tom was triumphant, gloating. I wanted to fight. Every maternal instinct in me screamed to hold on to my son. But looking at Jimmy's face, seeing the determination there, I knew it would only push him further away. With a heavy heart, I signed the papers. The finality of it crushed me. I spiraled into a deep depression. If it hadn't been for my mother, I'm not sure I would have survived. She moved in with me, forcing me to eat, to get out of bed, to keep living. Slowly, painfully, I started to rebuild my life. I threw myself into work, started volunteering at a local animal shelter. Anything to fill the void left by Jimmy's absence. 3 years after the divorce, I met David. He was kind, successful, and patient. He listened as I poured out my story, offering support without judgment. When David proposed, I surprised myself by saying yes. As we exchanged vows, I felt a mix of joy and sadness. This wasn't the life I'd planned, but maybe it was the life I was meant to have. Just when I thought I had my new life figured out, I discovered I was pregnant. The news hit me like a tidal wave of emotions: joy, fear, excitement, and a twinge of sadness as I remembered the son I'd lost. David was over the moon. He'd always wanted children, but had never had the chance. We threw ourselves into preparing for the baby, transforming one of the rooms in our new house into a nursery. Oh, the house. It was everything I'd ever dreamed of and more, spacious with a beautiful garden and a view that took my breath away. Every morning as I stood in the kitchen, my hand resting on my growing belly, I couldn't help but think how different this was from the life I'd had before. I tried not to think about Jimmy. He never called, never answered my messages. But I couldn't help myself from checking his social media accounts. At first, I told myself it was just to make sure he was okay. But as I scrolled through photos of lavish parties, expensive cars, and exotic vacations, I felt a growing unease. The carefree boy I'd raised was gone, replaced by a young man who seemed to value wealth and status above all else. I watched with a heavy heart as he posted about peasants who couldn't afford designer clothes or complained about having to interact with common people at events. The final straw came when he shared a rant about how people below his level shouldn't be allowed in certain clubs. That day, with tears in my eyes, I unfollowed his accounts. It hurt too much to see what he'd become. Months passed, and our daughter, Emily, came into the world. As I looked into her tiny face, I silently promised her that I would never let her go, never let anyone take her from me. As Emily grew, we started taking family trips, nothing extravagant, just weekend getaways to the beach or visits to nearby cities. I loved watching Emily's eyes light up at new experiences, hearing her delighted giggles as David swung her around in the waves. Life settled into a happy routine. I'd almost forgotten what it felt like to be constantly on edge, always worried about money or the next argument with David. With Emily, I felt safe, loved, and content. Then came the day that turned everything upside down again. It was a sunny Saturday afternoon. David had taken Emily to the entertainment center for some daddy-daughter time, and I was enjoying a rare moment of quiet, catching up on some reading in our living room. The doorbell rang, startling me. We weren't expecting any visitors. Curiously, I went to answer it. The moment I opened the door, my heart stopped. Standing on my doorstep, looking older and somehow both familiar and strange, was Jimmy. He was taller now, his boyish features sharpened into those of a young man. He was dressed expensively, a gold watch glinting on his wrist, but it was his eyes that caught me. They were hard, calculating, so different from the warm brown eyes I remembered. "Hey, Mom," he said, his voice deeper than I remembered. "Long time no see." I stood frozen, unable to speak. Jimmy's eyes roamed past me, taking in the foyer with its high ceilings and elegant decor. He let out a low whistle. Wow, nice place you've got here. Looks like you're not doing too bad for yourself. His tone was casual, almost mocking. I felt a chill run down my spine. Jimmy, I finally managed to stammer. What are you doing here? How did you find me? He shrugged, a smirk playing on his lips. Grandma told me. Don't worry, I had to work hard to get it out of her. She's quite protective of you. I made a mental note to thank my mother later and to have a serious talk with her about boundaries. Can I come in? Jimmy asked, not waiting for an answer as he brushed past me into the house. I stood in the living room, watching as Jimmy sauntered in and sprawled across our pristine white couch like he owned the place. What happened, Jimmy? Why are you here? I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. He let out a bitter laugh. Oh, it's a real soap opera, Mom. Turns out my dear old stepmom wasn't as devoted as we all thought. Vanessa divorced Dad and kicked us both out of the house. Can you believe it? That impudent gold digger found herself a younger model and decided she didn't need us anymore. I winced at his crude language, but he was on a roll now. Guess I bet on the wrong horse, huh? He looked at me pointedly. Should have stuck with good old reliable Mom instead of chasing the high life with that. His words stung, bringing back all the pain of his rejection. But before I could respond, he switched gears. But hey, water under the bridge, right? You're still my mom. We've got a lot of lost time to make up for. His tone was jovial, but there was something unsettling in his eyes that made me uneasy. I took a deep breath. Jimmy, I'm not sure it's that simple. You chose to cut me out of your life. Legally, I'm not your mother anymore. He waved his hand dismissively. Technicalities. Blood is thicker than water and all that crap. Besides, he grinned, think of all the money you saved not having to raise me these past few years. It's only fair you share some of that now, right? Right. And there it was, the real reason for his sudden reappearance in my life. I'm sorry, Jimmy, but I can't just give you money, I said firmly. I have responsibilities here. I have a daughter to raise. Oh, so you replaced me, huh? He interrupted his laugh, ugly and bitter. Got yourself a shiny new kid and forgot all about your firstborn. I felt my temper rising, but fought to stay calm. It's not like that, Jimmy. Look, if you need help, maybe I could talk to David about getting you a job. A job, he scoffed, cutting me off again. I don't need a job. I need cash. Come on, Mom, you owe me. I don't owe you anything, I said, my voice finally hardening. You made your choice years ago. I'm sorry you're in a tough situation, but I can't just hand over money to you. His face darkened, all pretense of friendliness vanishing. You selfish fat witch, he snarled, jumping to his feet. Dad was right to leave you. You're nothing but a nasty old hag who cares more about her bank account than her own son. Before I could respond, he stormed out, slamming the door so hard a picture fell off the wall. I sank onto the sofa, my legs no longer able to support me. Tears welled up in my eyes, spilling over as great heaving sobs racked my body. This angry, entitled young man. How could this be my Jimmy? Where had I gone wrong? Was this my fault for not fighting harder to keep him? Or was this the inevitable result of the lifestyle Tom and Vanessa had given him? I don't know how long I sat there crying. All I know is that when I heard David's key in the lock, I hurriedly wiped my eyes, not wanting to worry him or Emily. But as soon as David walked in, Emily toddling beside him, he took one look at my face and knew something was wrong. Lauren, what happened? He asked, concern edged on his features. I looked at my husband, then at my daughter, Her innocent face turned up to me in confusion at seeing Mommy upset. In that moment, I made a decision. This was my family now. Jimmy had made his choice long ago, and I couldn't let his reappearance destroy the life I'd rebuilt. The morning after Jimmy's unexpected visit, my phone rang. It was my mother, her voice a mix of worry and excitement. "Lauren, Jimmy came to see me. He needed money, so I lent him some. I thought you'd want to know he's okay." My heart fell. "Mom, please refrain from giving him any more cash. The Jimmy we knew has changed. All he wants is easy money. He has no desire to labor. Make me a promise that you won't give him any more." I hung up the phone and sat with my head in my hands at the kitchen table. I knew that this wasn't the end. As expected, my mother called again a few days later, sounding much more worried. Jimmy had returned and was requesting more cash. He got combative, yelling and beating on my door when I refused. The final straw was that David and I got to work right away. After dropping Emily off with David's parents, we spent the week at my mother's place. It was our turn to keep awake, alert at all times. On a soggy Thursday evening, the confrontation we had been dreading finally materialized. Jimmy arrived, banging on the door and yelling for money while obviously intoxicated. With David following on my tail, I opened the door. "Jimmy, you need to leave now." His eyes lacked focus and were wild. He pushed forward, "Not until I get what's mine." But David stopped him. Jimmy stumbled and said, "I'm warning you. I'll make you all sorry if you don't give me what I want." David then made a police call. Jimmy persisted in his tirade and threats as we waited for them to show up. In the backdrop, my mother trembled and clutched her chest. My heart hurt to see her misery and dread. Jimmy was swiftly taken away and subdued by the cops upon their arrival. I had an odd mixture of relief and melancholy as the patrol car drove away. I messaged Tom on social media later that evening in the hopes that he could assist Jimmy. He gave a chilly reaction. "It's no longer my concern. Vanessa stole everything from me and left me to cope with my own problems. Jimmy is by himself." I could feel the remaining strands of my former existence finally breaking as I read his remarks. I went to court the following day to get a restraining order against Jimmy. Although it was the toughest thing I had ever done, I felt it was essential to keep my family safe. Years elapsed after months. Jimmy was never seen by us again. Though sleepless nights decreased with time, life continued on. Occasionally, I would lay awake at night, wondering where he was and whether he was okay. As Emily developed into a bright and inquisitive little child, David's business prospered. I experienced a deep sense of tranquility one Sunday afternoon when I watched David pushing Emily on the swing in our backyard. My life was now like this, not flawless but full of joy, laughing and love.
Poor Scott just graduated from high school, but I suppose I'll give him a shot. I'm going to ask him a really difficult question. I will give him $100,000 if he can figure it out. What? What on earth is she saying? She was the girl I admired in high school. The person who showed kindness to a lonely man without friends like me. I attended the reunion merely to express my gratitude for her generosity, but she had changed greatly. And then she made this ridiculous offer to me. She moved in close, smiling, and whispered in my ear as I gaped at her in disbelief. "I bet you've never seen $100,000 in your life, huh? I'm a rich girl, and I'm offering you some charity. I'm the sweetest, am I not?" A wave of frustration washed over me. And here is how the girl I had long admired turned out. I could ignore it, but even I have boundaries. It irritated me. "All right, I'll comply with your request if that's how you want it." "Okay, so you'll give me $100,000 if I figure it out." "Oh, so you're willing to do it?" Exactly what I would anticipate from a poor man. I must admit that I admire that spirit of tenacity. All okay. Just keep an eye on me. I'll find a solution quickly. Allow me to demonstrate a never-before-seen comeback for you. Sullivan Scott is my name. These days, I work for a big IT company. I earn enough to live well, but my father passed away in an accident when I was growing up, and we had financial difficulties. In addition, I struggled to fit in and had a lonely school life, possibly due to my nature. I struggle to manage my emotions and understand social cues. I understand yes and no, but I simply don't understand the common ambiguous statements used in Japanese. I simply keep quiet when I see someone struggling or depressed because I don't know how to help them, which gives the impression that I'm cold. People always kept a certain distance from me as a result. In particular, the females would make fun of me and call me names like Iron Mask or Living Doll, which just made me feel more awkward in their presence. For me, building groups during physical education or school functions was one of the most challenging aspects. The phrase, "all right, everyone, get into groups of 4 with whoever you want," which Miss Andrews would say, was a sign that someone was being singled out. One group after another would emerge, and I was never asked to join any of them. Oh, Scott omitted once more. Is anyone open to Scott joining? Most individuals would pretend they couldn't hear Miss Andrews when she called out. Miss Andrews' voice might occasionally persuade me to join a group of 5, but even then, the other 4 would talk, and I would be completely excluded. Until I reached high school and discovered a true savior, those lonely school years persisted. Sarah was her name. She genuinely asked me to join her group when she noticed that I was being left out on a school trip once more. "What? Is this your charity work once more, Sarah?" Emily, her buddy, told her. "Come on, you realized it's sad. The excursion is for school. Shouldn't it be enjoyable?" Okay, Sarah, if you insist. Okay then. Adding me created a perfect 4, as Sarah's typical group consisted of 3 people. But ever since, whenever she could, she has always included me. I gradually began to be able to communicate with people because of her. Sarah, as it turned out, was the daughter of a company president. Not only was she beautiful, but her refined manners made her the center of admiration in our class. The mere fact that someone like her would reach out to me was enough to make me feel elated. During high school, I quietly harbored feelings for her, but in the end, I couldn't bring myself to confess, and we graduated without anything happening. While most of my classmates went on to college, I took a job at a small company to help support my mother. I remember the big stir in our class when everyone found out that Sarah had gotten into Tokyo University. I knew she was truly out of reach, a rare gem. Since then, I've had my share of ups and downs and now work at a different company. My income is worlds apart from what it was back then, enough that I can finally make things easier for my mother, who used to juggle multiple part-time jobs. Still, I haven't really changed when it comes to dealing with women. Even today, a woman I work with scolded me. "Get a move on. I've been telling you all morning that there's a meeting this afternoon, haven't I? If you're this behind on your tasks, you won't even have time to grab lunch. Sorry, I'll just have a sandwich in the car or something. Oh, that's terrible for your health. You can't keep doing that. All right, I'll try to be better from now on." Seriously, if I didn't push you, nothing would ever get done. The one nagging me from behind was Michelle. She's a beautiful employee who graduated from a well-known private university. At my current job, the schedule is packed down to the minute. I'm the type who forgets the time when I'm focused, so without her support, I can't seem to manage my tasks well. One day, in the midst of my hectic routine, I received a postcard. It was an invitation to my high school reunion. To be honest, I didn't have any friends to go with, nor did I really have the time. But a part of me wanted to see Sarah again and thank her for what she did back then. Before I realized it, I'd already checked attending and mailed back the reply. By the way, what's this evening appointment? I thought we had a meeting with another company that day. Oh, that. It's my high school reunion. I thought I'd finally give it a shot and go. The venue is close enough that I can make it right after our meeting. Wait, didn't you say before that you didn't have any close friends from high school? Yeah, that's true, but there was someone who helped me out back then. I thought maybe now I could finally thank her. Oh, is that so? Michelle seemed a bit displeased, though I couldn't quite figure out why. Maybe she was annoyed that I was taking time off for a reunion while everyone else was swamped with work. Hey, why don't you leave early that day and relax a bit too? Go have a drink with a friend or something. Her expression immediately soured even more. No thanks. I'll be here handling all the pile-up paperwork as diligent as ever. That's all I've got going for me. Besides, don't forget, we have an early flight the next morning. Oh, right. Phew. Absolutely no after parties. All right, we're heading out at 3:00 a.m. Yeah. I got it. With a 3:00 a.m. departure, staying out drinking all night isn't an option. I finally started to understand why she seemed so irritated. A few days later, I headed to the reunion venue. It was held in a ballroom at a downtown hotel, filled with quite a crowd in a dazzling setting. There was karaoke, bingo, and some sort of game set up on a whiteboard with geometric magnetic tiles attached. In the center of the room was a particularly glamorous group, and right at the heart of it was the woman I'd come to see. Wait, who's that? As I walked in a bit late, someone whispered, glancing at me, but nobody seemed to recognize who I was. Back in high school, I wore second-hand uniforms, but today I was dressed sharply in a suit. My build was different too, having gained some well-toned muscle over the years, so it wouldn't be easy for them to connect the dots to the guy I was back then. I walked over to the lively group surrounding Sarah and called her name. It's been a long time, Sarah. Right. Yes, I am Sarah. But who are you? She tilted her head slightly, looking at me with a hint of blush, unable to recognize me at first glance. It's Scott from our class. Thanks for always talking to me back then. What? You're Scott. As I thanked her, the woman beside Sarah gave me a suspicious look. That was probably Emily, the same friend who'd always been by Sarah's side in high school. Unlike Sarah, she'd been bluntly unpleasant to me, and to be honest, I didn't like her at all. Well, seems that gloomy aura from back then is gone. But in the end, you're still just Scott, aren't you? How brave of you to come to a reunion when you don't even have any friends. Hey, Emily, that's a bit harsh. Sarah stepped in to soften Emily's jab, but something felt off. She wasn't the same Sarah I remembered, and her next words confirmed my suspicion. You know, it'd be a bit of a problem if you got the wrong idea. The only reason I bothered to talk to you in high school was because you looked so pitiful being all alone. I thought being nice might help with my college recommendation. I figured it couldn't hurt to stay in the teacher's good graces. Thanks to that, I got into Tokyo University, became Miss Campus, and now I'm next in line at my dad's company. I don't have to worry about appearances anymore. Being liked by a poor, unremarkable guy? No thanks. You get what I'm saying, Sarah. You're being way too honest. The second they realized I was Scott, the people around us started looking at me with a sneer. Look, I'm not here because I want anything from you, Sarah. I just wanted to thank you. Oh, is that right? I guess you finally understand your place now that you're all grown up. Oh, wow. Sarah, you're really letting it all out there. Snickering echoed around us. Hey, isn't that watch Scott's wearing super expensive? One of her friends made a show of noticing my watch. Look at Scott, a high school graduate with a fancy watch. Must be a fake. It's hilarious how flashy poor people try to look. I was ready to just ignore them and move on when Sarah suddenly grabbed my arm. Hey, what are you doing? Just a little bored, that's all. Come on, Humor me for a bit. Sarah picked up the microphone in the hall and made an announcement that was beyond humiliating. Everyone, we have Scott here, a high school grad. Remember him? He was pretty invisible back then, but do you remember? The crowd's attention instantly turned toward us. Scott here is wearing a fake luxury watch just to impress everyone at the reunion. The laughter began almost immediately. No way, how embarrassing. This was a nightmare. I wanted to disappear. And for our poor Scott, I think I'll give him a chance. I'm about to give him a super difficult problem. If he can solve it, I'll give him $100,000. Wait, what? What is she talking about? As I stared at her in stunned silence, she leaned in with a smug grin and whispered in my ear. You've probably never seen that much money in your life, have you? A rich girl like me is offering to help you out. Aren't I just the sweetest? I was furious. The girl I had admired all this time turned out to be like this. I could just let it go, but even I have my limits. It got under my skin. If that's how you want it, then fine. I'll take you up on that. All right, so if I solve it, you'll give me $100,000, right? Oh, you're actually up for it. That's what I like about poor folks, their scrappy spirit. The crowd was buzzing with excitement. Oh, go for it, Scott. Just the other day, a friend mentioned an incredibly hard problem. They said anyone who solved it would be a genius. Even someone from Tokyo University couldn't solve it right away. Think you can handle it? She began writing the problem on the whiteboard. It was a question from the 1990 International Mathematical Olympiad held in China. That's what they call the Master Demon Pro problem. This is way too hard. Looks like you're in big trouble, Scott. Amid the mocking laughter, I responded with a straight face. This is all you've got. The answer is right in front of everyone watching. I breezed through the problem without even breaking a sweat, solving it in less than a minute. No way. I can't believe it. At first, people around me were stunned, not comprehending what just happened. But then they burst into applause and cheers. Unbelievable, Scott. This guy just won $100,000. As the crowd's mocking turns into cheers, Sarah shoots an angry glare at me. Just because you managed to solve one problem, don't start acting all high and mighty. A lowly high school graduate like you will always be just that, a poor nobody. I didn't mean to upset her, but it's already out of control. As I'm pondering what to do, out of nowhere, I hear Michelle's voice behind me. President Sullivan, it's about time. If we don't get you to the hotel soon, it might affect tomorrow's work. Oh, Michelle, seeing her here, someone who wasn't supposed to be in this crowd, gives me an odd sense of relief. The people around us, hearing her address me, are now buzzing with confusion. Wait, President? Who is that beautiful woman? Also, as it seems, someone here has been quite disrespectful to our company's president. I'd like to clarify. Mr. Sullivan graduated from Cambridge, and our company ranks among the top in the nation. He's neither a high school grad nor poor, for the record. Now, shall we, Mr. Sullivan? Yeah, let's go. As Michelle and I start to exit the room, gasps and murmurs ripple through the crowd. Wait, I know her. She's the famous assistant from SKT System Solutions. So does that mean Scott is the president of that company? Come to think of it, I think I've seen him in a business magazine before. The truth is, I am the president of one of the top 8 companies in the country, SKT System Solutions. I wasn't exactly a bad student back in school. I just didn't like drawing attention, so I kept my grades average on purpose. Since childhood, I've had a photographic memory, the ability to retain images exactly as I saw them. This unique memory skill, often called tick memory, made me celebrated as a genius. People had high hopes, thinking I would one day be a pillar of the nation, and I was even appointed class representative in elementary school. However, a class rep needs to lead, listen to others, and unite the class. I wasn't good at understanding others' thoughts, and I often said the wrong things, quickly becoming isolated. The adults who had pinned their hopes on me grew disappointed, labeling me as lacking in cooperation. I'll never forget the cold, disheartened look my teacher gave me. From that point on, I kept my academic abilities hidden and avoided standing out throughout my school years. I was seen as a failure, lacking intelligence, social skills, and money. But my uncle, seeing my potential, encouraged me to attend a university overseas. He found scholarships and mutual aid programs to help me attend Cambridge University. So it's no surprise that my old classmates, who only knew me from high school, scoffed at my name. They never would have guessed that I would become a high-achieving, high-earning president. I hadn't planned to reveal this side of me, but at this point, there's no helping it. Michelle, how long will it take to get from here to the hotel? I've reserved a hotel close to the airport so we can get room service for dinner. Your flight is at 5:20 am. As we prepare to leave, the women who were keeping their distance suddenly light up and start chatting me up. Wait, are you really a president, Scott? If you just told us that sooner. Exactly. We're classmates, you know. Don't be so reserved. As I stand there, baffled by their sudden change in attitude, Sarah approaches with a different, friendly smile. So, Scott, you're the president of SKT System Solutions now? No wonder you solved that problem so easily. Say, how about we grab a bite together after this? It'd be nice to reminisce about old times. Just as I'm left speechless by her about-face, Michelle's voice sounds again from behind me. Excuse me, but there's no way Mr. Sullivan, a renowned young mind of Japan, would waste his time with someone who mocked him. You mentioned giving $100,000 if he solved the problem, but our company's annual revenue is in the tens of billions of dollars. Trying to lure Mr. Sullivan with such a small amount is pointless. The tens of billions of dollars. As Sarah and her friends stand speechless, Michelle takes my hand and confidently leads me through the hall. And just like that, I turned the reunion I looked forward to into a grand showcase of karma. Before leaving the venue, in the car on the way back, Michelle bows her head apologetically. Mr. Sullivan, I apologize for speaking out of turn and being so rude to your friends. Don't worry about it, but you were keeping your current position a secret, weren't you? Yeah, but it's all right. You were just trying to help me, right? I actually appreciated it. You did. Then I'm glad. Hearing that, her cheeks turn red all the way to her ears, and seeing her like that, I find her even more endearing. A few months later, while out in the suburbs on personal business, I catch sight of a woman who looks remarkably like Sarah. Her posture looks weary, a stark contrast to the confident presence she once had. Is that Sarah? I call out, and she turns around startled. It's undeniably Sarah. Scott, are you okay? You look exhausted. When I speak my mind, she gives a bitter laugh. You probably already know, right? Our company got delisted recently. I'm sure you're here to laugh at the one who insulted you. Really? I'm sorry. I'm clueless about stocks. What? So you didn't come over just to mock me? Why would I? I answer honestly, and she chuckles softly, looking amused. Come to think of it, you were always like that. You've never been one to sneer at others or say anything two-faced. Sorry, I guess subtlety isn't my strength. There's no need to apologize. That's actually something to be proud of. Maybe, but it's true that back in school, you were my motivation. I genuinely liked you, so when I heard you preferred intelligent guys, I studied my heart out. That's how I ended up going to Cambridge. In a way, I owe who I am now to you. You do. So, regardless of what happens to your company, your worth doesn't change. I understand things are tough right now, but I don't think giving up is the answer. Don't you agree? You're right, but I've already been working so hard. And while you might be concerned about being listed, our company is highly profitable as a private unicorn. Sure, listing brings credibility, but it also comes with restrictions. No listing costs fewer risks of acquisition. It's a matter of management style. You're smart, Sarah. Why not build the company you really want? You're right. Born as a president's daughter, I've always lived trying to meet others' expectations. But maybe it's time I try my own approach. Thank you. I'm going to give it a shot. Not long after, I hear she launched a new jewelry brand. Previously, they'd focused on high-end pieces, but now she's also offering affordable items for everyday use. Her brand has garnered significant attention for its successful new market strategy. So I decide to place an order with her brand for my company's commemorative gifts. Honestly, it's my way of giving back to her for her hard work. She soon visits our office. Mr. Sullivan, thank you so much for choosing our company. No problem. I'd heard you were doing well after all your hard work, so consider this both a congratulations and an order. Still, it means so much to me. If you're free, would you join me for dinner after our meeting? As she quickly invites me, Michelle just as quickly interjects. Unfortunately, Mr. Sullivan has a dinner meeting scheduled with a client tonight. Oh well, what about tomorrow or the day after? No, I'm afraid his schedule is fully booked for the next 3 months. Then after that? No, his schedule will remain fully booked indefinitely. Watching their back and forth, I can barely hold back my laughter. I can't help but chuckle, and Sarah looks visibly relieved. I'm glad to see you smiling like this, Scott. What are you talking about? Mr. Sullivan is always smiling. Yes, well, that must be because you're by his side. That puts my mind at ease. Beautiful, take good care of him, okay. Support him well. Of course, even without you saying so, I'll be here to support him for life. Well, that's good to hear. I'll take my leave now, Mr. Sullivan. I look forward to working with you in the future. Sarah seemed different somehow, as though she'd shed her old self. Curious, I couldn't help but ask her. Sarah, you seem different. Did something shift for you? Oh, you noticed. Actually, when my father's company was in trouble, all those people who'd been hanging around me just vanished. I thought they were my close friends, so it was a shock. But deep down, I realized that's just how things are. All the effort I put into being liked was only worth so much, and just like that, it was gone. So, I decided to stop caring about what others think and just live true to myself. I see. I think that's great, the way you are now, Sarah. You seem more alive than ever. Thank you, Scott. You said I saved you back in high school, but this time, it's the other way around. You saved me. Truly, thank you. No, it was all you. You're the one who worked hard to overcome it. You haven't changed, Scott. With a smile, Sarah left the office. Since then, we've remained good friends, talking regularly. Back in school, I was at my lowest point, but because of that time, I can now fully appreciate where I am. For anyone feeling like they're at rock bottom, I hope you can take a step back and see the big picture. One day, you'll be able to look back and laugh, thinking, yeah, I went through that too. My name is Ethan. I'm 27 years old. I'm just a typical office worker. I use a computer all day at work, but right now I can't see the screen clearly. Every time I try to take a deep breath with my eyes closed, they just won't open. I'm feeling dizzy. I've been struggling to get through my work, relying on caffeine from coffee to push through the day. Finally, it's the end of the workday. As everyone else is calling it a day, I lean both elbows on my desk, rest my forehead on them, and close my eyes, thinking, finally, time to go home. Hey, are you okay? You've been looking a bit off lately, like you're not feeling well. My boss, Robert, talks to me with a concerned voice from behind. No, I'm just sleep-deprived, sorry. I'll be more careful. Seeing Robert look worried, I decide to tell him the truth. I thought you would scold me for staying up late, but instead he seemed worried about my lack of sleep. Is something going on? Insomnia is pretty serious, he says, expressing his concern. I really wanted to reassure him, but it's true that I'm struggling. While it's none of Robert's business, I decide to tell him about the cause of my insomnia. A month ago, a new neighbor moved into the room next to mine. My apartment is a rundown corner unit on the first floor, and the room next to mine had been vacant for a while. A student-looking guy moved in during the moving season, and he's been making noise every night, bringing friends over. He seems to be a night owl, making noise, shouting, and occasionally causing the wall to shake. Additionally, it seems someone new moved into the room above mine as well, who runs the washing machine at night and stomps around loudly. I used to hear the sounds of the neighbors' doors opening and closing, but I didn't realize how thin the walls were. Due to these disturbances, I've been waking up several times during the night and suffering from sleep deprivation. I don't want to have issues with my neighbors, but it's been unbearable. So I reported the situation to the landlord. Despite my report, the situation didn't improve. I talked to the landlord again, but he just said that he'd left a note for them and didn't seem like he could do anything more. I guess I have to put up with it as the rent is cheap, but it's really tough. I told Robert after hearing all this. He said, I see. That's quite a predicament. Lack of sleep can ruin your health. I understand your situation now. But don't hesitate to take a day off if you're not feeling well, okay? I felt grateful for his kindness and hoped that things would be better. However, even after another 2 weeks, the noise problem continued. I used to live in a shared house near my university when I was a student, so I thought I had a certain level of tolerance for noise. But this noise is too much for me. At the shared house, we had strict rules, and if someone broke them, they would be warned and eventually kicked out by the owner if they didn't change their behavior. As it's a convenient location for commuting and the rent is low rent, I chose this rundown apartment. But now I think the shared house was a much better choice. I don't want to underperform at work, so another day passed with me fighting sleep deprivation with the help of caffeine. As Robert was passing by, he talked to me. You still look pale. Don't push yourself too hard. I want to talk to you later, okay? And patted my shoulder. At the end of the day, Robert came to me and asked, can we talk in the meeting room? I thought I was going to be reprimanded for looking so rundown, but the words that came out of Robert's mouth took me by surprise. Ethan, you must be having a hard time. Why don't you come stay at my place? From the look on his face, it seemed like he wasn't joking. Apparently, he had been worried about me and had discussed it with his wife. It turned out that his wife also was concerned for my health, suggesting that I should stay at their place to prevent me from collapsing. You're still living in that apartment you rented when you got your first paycheck, aren't you? You should be able to afford a better place by now. Have you considered moving? But you probably can't hold up until you find a new apartment, right? For the time being, you should rest up at our house, okay? I didn't expect such concern and tried to politely decline, feeling a bit guilty. But Mr. Robert insisted humorously, promising delicious home-cooked meals if I decided to stay. I didn't give an answer at that time, deciding to think about it more. When I got home, my rundown apartment was not too bad as long as there was no noise. However, the incessant noisy disturbances made me decide to move out. I felt the urgent need for a peaceful place to rest. I was on the brink of collapsing, but my family lives out of state, and I had no friends in the vicinity to rely on. Although I felt guilty for inconveniencing Mr. and Mrs. Robert, I decided to accept their generous offer and stay with them until I found a new place. I had a moment of hesitation about living in the same house as my boss, but then again, it was not that much different from living in a shared house. I felt like I was imposing, but I decided to take them up on their offer. The next day, I gave Mr. Robert my answer and immediately started looking for a new place. It was decided that I would start staying at Robert's house from the following Sunday, and then the day has come when I arrive at Mr. Robert's house. Mrs. Robert welcomed me with a warm smile. I expressed my gratitude for their hospitality, to which she responded, "Don't be so nervous," as they helped me with my luggage and showed me to the room. "There's some time before dinner. Why not relax a little?" she suggested, and the three of us had a light conversation. "It's been a while since we saw you, John. You've really matured," Mrs. Robert commented. Actually, it was not my first time visiting their home. Back then, you used to bring your young colleagues over to our house for drinks. We don't see much of that these days, do we? I remember the times when I was a new recruit and Mr. Robert used to invite me over. He was always considerate of his subordinates and communicated with them a lot at his home. When drinking with bosses, there is often the exhaustion of having to listen to their heroic stories or their preaching about work. But Mr. Robert was different. Even when he talked about work, he was never imposing. He always listened carefully, which made him well loved by the younger staff. As we reminisced, Mr. Robert suddenly turned serious, saying, "Oh, I almost forgot. I have to tell you something important." He turned to me, a serious expression on his face. "We have a daughter living with us, John. I'm sure you understand, but don't try anything, all right?" His tone changed drastically as he stared intently at me. Mrs. Robert couldn't help but laugh at his stern demeanor. "I don't think John would do such a thing, but our daughter is quite pretty, you know," Mr. Robert said, his stern face softening slightly into a smirk. His wife chuckled. "You're still overly protective, as always." I remembered their daughter from her student days, and indeed she was a beautiful girl even then. Their daughter Amy had just graduated from college this spring and started working as hotel staff at the front desk. I met Amy at dinner time. We were having dinner without her as she was coming home late. When we heard her voice from the entrance, "I'm home," I greeted her at the dining table, apologizing for starting dinner without her. But when I looked up and got a proper look at her, I was momentarily stunned. Amy had grown up into a striking beauty. "No problem at all. Take your time," she said. Amy smiled and said something that had everyone at the table nodding in agreement. "She's so beautiful. It's no wonder the boss is so protective of her," we all joked. Amy then went to her room to drop off her bags, then took the seat next to me. At that point, the boss paused. "Hey, hold on a sec," he said, appearing flustered. The boss turned to Amy, who was about to start eating, and said, "You can't sit next to him, Amy. Come sit over here. She's a girl who's not yet married after all. We can't let her sit next to a guy so casually," he joked. Yet, there was a serious look in his eyes. We all ended up laughing at our overly protective boss. Before going to bed, I took a bath. "Ethan, can you drink herbal tea?" When I got out of the bath, the boss's wife asked me. So, when I replied that I was able to, she said, "That's great." Herbal tea helped you sleep, and made some for me. We were all sitting comfortably in the living room, drinking herbal tea, when suddenly the boss said, "Ethan, you're good at English, right?" When I nodded, he turned to Amy and said, "Amy, we've got a teacher right here." I saw Amy's eyes light up. When I asked why, she explained that she uses English a lot in her work at the hotel's front desk. The hotel is Japanese-oriented, so a lot of foreign tourists visit there. She had to pass an English test to get hired, but apparently, actual practice is quite difficult, and she's a bit insecure about phrasing and such. I actually spent 3 years abroad in high school. I followed my father on his overseas assignment and lived there. Even now, I can still speak English because I occasionally have to deal with people from English-speaking countries at work. Today, I just want you to rest. I don't want to push you. But if you're feeling better, could you take a look at my daughter's English? The boss asked me this, and Amy also requested it. Of course, I agreed. Thanks to the boss and his family's kindness, I was able to sleep well that night, and I recovered a few days later. Going to work with the boss every morning was a strange feeling, but I got to hear all sorts of work stories from him, and it made me feel like a new employee again. I also felt happy that we could now talk as equals. His wife, who is a housewife, was really good to me. The food was delicious, and she even did my laundry. I was so grateful I didn't know what to say. The boss and I, who both have weekends off, started having a drink together on Saturday nights. He used to drink every night, but now he's being health conscious and only allows himself to drink on Saturday nights. We enjoyed the evening with food prepared by the boss. I was surprised that he could cook, and we had a great time talking over drinks. As I listened to the boss talk and nodded, I suddenly became emotional. He talks about stories about his daughter with a kind tone, his wish for happiness for his family, and his advice to me to walk a similar path in life. Watching him, I couldn't help but think of my own father. My father passed away before I became an adult, just after we returned from the 3-year overseas assignment. I remembered the time shortly before he died when he told me, "Ethan, when you become an adult, I want to share a drink with you." Maybe it was also because the boss's gentle way of speaking was so much like my father's. If my father were alive now, would he be like this? Thinking that, tears streamed down my face. "Hey, what's wrong?" Turning to my side, I found myself crying, no doubt surprising my boss. "No, I'm good. Just drunk a little too much." I shrugged it off with a sheepish response, but couldn't help the tears from spilling out even as I tried to hold them back. "No, I apologize. I was just thinking of my dad," I admitted candidly. Then I talked about the promise I couldn't keep with my father. "Is that so?" There were tears in my boss's eyes as he said, "Your father would be proud if he saw you now, Ethan. You've grown into a hard-working, good guy." He said that, patting my shoulder reassuringly. The words just made me cry even more. His tone was just like my father's. It felt like my dad was talking to me. That night became a special one for me. As we promised, I used the spare time in the evening to tutor Amy. Her days off changed due to her shift schedule and her being a new employee. But when she comes home early, we are able to find common time. She asks me about the conversations she struggles with, what she couldn't understand on that day. I answer her questions, and she actively asks me for more. I advise her on how native speakers would say it, the polite way of phrasing things. Amy diligently takes notes, practices pronunciation with me. In response to enthusiasm, I do role-playing exercises with her repeatedly to make her more practical in conversation and actions. Initially, I was nervous around Amy, but recently we've been able to chat casually. We've started trying to make these small talks in English, making it a bit of a game, and we've become somewhat friendly. Before I knew it, it's almost a month since I moved into my boss's place. Although I've been constantly looking for a new place, the good ones seem to fill up before I can even go see them. Maybe it's the season. I've been looking around without sticking to a single real estate agency, but whether it's bad luck or my searching method, I start to feel anxious. I can't keep relying on my boss indefinitely. I thought at that time, speaking of which, Ethan, no, it's okay. Yeah, my boss nervously started to speak. Ethan, you haven't moved out of your old apartment yet, have you? I was surprised, feeling as if he'd read my mind. I uttered a no, it's fine. You can stay as long as you like. But Ethan, you've gotten comfortable here, haven't you? He said, grinning knowingly. But it was true. Even though it was at odds with my anxious feelings, I'm sorry. Honestly, I'm very comfortable here, I said, and my boss laughed heartily. Although I had a lot of trouble finding a place, I ended up finding one that was far better than what I originally aimed for. Thankfully, it was okay to move in as soon as possible. Once I secured my new place, I notified the landlord of my current apartment about my departure. Because the move was so sudden, I ended up having to pay for 2 places for a month. But I couldn't continue to rely on my boss for another month, accepting it as unavoidable. I quickly started to prepare for the move. Moreover, my boss said he would help move things if I didn't have too much luggage. I ended up relying on him until the day of the move. On the day I left my boss's house, I made sure to thank his wife sincerely. I had stayed at their place for about a month, being cared for in every way. In gratitude, I prepared something to serve as a sort of rent payment, but both the boss and his wife refused, saying it wasn't necessary. "You tutored our daughter, so we're even," they said. After some time passed living in my new apartment, while I enjoyed the comfortable life, I also felt nostalgic for the time spent at my boss's place. I had been thinking of visiting them again. "Excuse me, boss. I'd really like to express my gratitude properly. May I come over next Saturday?" I asked nervously. He replied, "No need for thanks, but we can drink together again. My daughter is off next Saturday, so it's perfect timing." Although he seemed happy, I was a bit nervous. On Saturday evening, as I rang the doorbell at the boss's house, he greeted me cheerfully. "Tonight, my wife and Amy prepared a feast because they knew you were coming. Come on in." Both his wife and Amy greeted me with smiles. "First things first, Ethan, let's have a beer and toast." As my boss went to pour the beer, I stopped him. "Wait, boss. I have something to say before that." In my words, his wife and Amy moved closer. Seeing this, the boss looked surprised, but his wife settled him down, saying, "Just let him speak." Then I stepped back and spoke out. "Boss, I have been dating your daughter, and I wanted to formally let you know." With that, I bowed deeply. When I lifted my face, the boss seemed frozen, deep in thought. After a while, he finally asked, "What do you mean by that?" Then Amy came next to me and said to her father, "I fell in love with him." His wife added, "Ethan is a wonderful person, isn't he?" She and Amy giggled. Seeing this, the boss was flustered. "You knew about this." His wife and Amy exchanged glances and started laughing. "I didn't know anything about this, Ethan. What is this all about?" The boss tried to regain some fatherly dignity, but his wife chuckled. "Aren't you actually pleased?" Exposed by his wife, the boss was flustered and said, "Don't say things like that." She continued, "You said it would be nice to have a son like Ethan." Drinking alone after he left. That was when my wife blurted it out, and I was taken aback, saying, "Don't mention that." "I can't help it. If it's Ethan—" "No, seriously, you guys." I grumbled, our team leader with a mix of joy and disbelief. I handed him the gift I bought. There was his favorite brand of liquor inside. Seeing this, he chuckled, "Nice choice. All right, you're forgiven. Let's have a celebratory drink to your relationship with my daughter, Amy." He had given us his blessing. We shared drinks and stories. "Oh, I might be a bit tipsy," he admitted, a perpetual smile on his face. From the way he was talking, it seemed he was quite drunk. "Listen, Ethan, if you don't make my daughter happy, you won't get off easily. But I'm glad the first guy she brought home is you, Ethan. I'm glad it wasn't some weirdo. Please take good care of my daughter." It felt as if I was announcing our marriage, even though I had only intended to announce our relationship. But it did become reality. 3 years since then, the team lead is now my father-in-law. Rather, he has become more a father to me. I used to say, "I wish I had a son like Ethan," and now it's really happened. Ethan, let's keep this going. It's our usual Saturday now. We enjoy drinks together with Amy and my mother-in-law. How was that? Subscribing to the channel gives us encouragement to produce more. See you in the next video.
My dad yelled at me and said I wasn't important anymore. He didn't want me in our house ever again. My fan said John backed him up. I left home crying right after finishing high school. My name's Amy. Now I'm 36 years old and work as a farmer. It's been 18 years since I left home. I've spent more time living my own life than I did with my family, and that makes me feel emotional. We used to live in a city. My dad worked in an office and my mom stayed at home. We were a family of 4, including my older brother. My parents always favored my brother because he was the firstborn. He got better food and fancier presents. He'd brag about it and make me feel small. Sometimes I felt really lonely and wished for attention, but my parents never changed, so I stopped trying. The big change in my life happened during the summer of my second year in high school. My brother was busy studying for a tough college entrance exam, hoping to get into a really good university. His practice test scores were bad, so he was always stressed out and took it out on me whenever he could. My parents treated him like he was fragile, being super careful with him, while I got stuck with all the household chores. That left me no time to study, even though I was doing better in school than my brother. They wanted to bring my grades down to make him feel better. It didn't make any sense. Around that time, one of my teachers told me about a program where students could go experience life on a farm for a few days. We'd stay with a family who owned a farm, helped with harvesting vegetables, cooked together, and just lived like country folks for a bit. Despite my family troubles, I decided to join the program, but my dad said farming is only for people who can't get better jobs, and my mom laughed at me, saying, "Are you crazy? You want to do manual labor and get all dirty." But I didn't listen to them and used my own money to sign up. It was the first time I stood up to my parents, and it turned out to be a great decision for me. Despite really wanting love from my family, it was an amazing experience. Working outside in the fresh air of the countryside felt so good, and I finally felt the warmth of a real family. The oldest son in that family, John, was just a year older than me, the same age as my brother. But John was nothing like my brother. He was kind, strong, got along well with his parents, and treated me nicely too. John's parents were really gentle, and even though I was only there for 3 days, I cried a lot when it was time to leave. John's mom cried too, and she said, "You can come back anytime." I promised I would. They said they didn't use their phones much, so I started writing them letters regularly. Before long, John started writing back more often, and it turned into like a diary we shared, and we started dating. It was a pure, long-distance relationship without even a single kiss. After my brother didn't get into his first-choice university and ended up in a lower-ranked college, it was my turn to apply for college. But my parents wanted me to get a job instead of going to college. They said it was because girls didn't need education, but really, I think they didn't want me to go to a better college than my brother. Since my time on the farm, I dreamed of being a farmer. I could have become one without going to college, but John was in college, so I decided to go and study a new kind of farming. Even though my parents and brother tried to stop me, I worked hard every day towards my goal. But when I passed the entrance exam for university, my dad got really angry and said, "Are you a girl trying to go to a better college than your brother?" My mom said, "We don't have money to spend on you. Your brother needs it, so you should work and bring money home." My parents' hurtful words left me feeling alone and sad, and after a big fight, I decided to cut ties with them completely. John came to get me from home, and his parents, who were now my in-laws, helped pay for my college. I ended up going to college, and 4 years later I married John. I didn't speak to my parents or brother during college, but when my in-laws said we should at least tell them about the wedding, we went to my childhood home for the first time in 4 years. It was summer after graduation and a busy time for planting, so we couldn't visit earlier. We all had tanned faces from working outside, but my parents and brother made fun of us. My mom asked, "How old are you now? You must be poor to work outside and get so dark." I felt so embarrassed. "Please stop, Mom," I said quietly, but she didn't listen. My brother smirked and said, "Smart people like me make money with our brains. If you're stuck doing manual labor, it means you're not very smart." I felt sick, and my in-laws' smiles disappeared. My husband spoke up, saying, We're proud to be farmers and we work hard. My dad laughed in a mean way and told me, from now on, you're a stranger to us. You're marrying a farmer who works hard for a living. We're going to pretend you don't exist. Don't come to us for money. We don't want to see you anymore. At 18, I already felt like I didn't belong, so his words didn't surprise me, but it still hurt, especially with my in-laws and John looking at me with sympathy. I cried quietly on the way home, deciding to forget about my family. Time passed quickly, and 18 years went by. The hurt started to fade. I had 2 kids and a busy but happy life. I almost forgot about my parents and brother until a cousin told me my brother was getting married. We were close and kept in touch even after I got married. I once sent them rice from our farm, and they liked it, so we stayed in touch and talked on the phone once a month. My cousin mentioned we could catch up at the wedding. My cousin said, but I hadn't heard anything about the wedding from my parents or brother. Since we're not talking, I wouldn't know. I heard they're building a new house. I wonder if it's done. It seemed both my parents and brother planned to move after the wedding. My cousin knew about the problems between my parents and me, but they probably assumed I'd still show up at important family events. After the call with my cousin, I impulsively called my mom's cell phone, but all I got was a message saying, "This number is no longer in use." I tried calling my father next, but got the same automated message again. Did they change their numbers? I didn't have my brother's number, so I couldn't call him. With shaky hands, I dialed the landline for our family home, and someone picked up. "Hello, it was my brother. It's Amy. I heard you're getting married and moving." I started to congratulate him, but he interrupted me. "You don't need to do anything. You're a farmer, a stranger to me. Don't call me," he yelled before hanging up. I tried calling him back, but I was already blocked. It was so harsh. No matter how much he disliked me, we were still a family. It hurt to be rejected like that. Seeing how upset I was, my husband asked gently, "What's wrong? What happened?" I couldn't hold back my tears as I told him about the conversation. Both my husband and my in-laws were furious, as if it had happened to them. "Your home is here, Amy. Your family to us." My mother-in-law comforted me. Her words brought tears to my eyes. I wish she was my real mom. She cared about me more than my own mother did, I thought. My father-in-law also reassured me, saying, "You're happy now. That's what matters. Don't let it hurt you." My husband added, "Let's learn from their mistakes and make sure we're different." Even our kids, unaware of the situation, hugged me tightly. "Thank you, everyone," I said, feeling the warmth in my heart. I realized how happy I was even without the support of my biological family. But things changed dramatically when my business was featured on national TV. My in-laws were big grain farmers in the American Midwest. They grew lots of fruits and veggies, but some didn't meet standards. I studied food business in college and figured out how to sell the produce that wasn't perfect. I started an online business selling jams, juices, and sauces made from those fruits and veggies. With support from the local farmers union, my business became a hit. Moms loved our safe, homegrown food, and seniors enjoyed the homemade pickles. I hired young women who, like me, married into farming families, and unemployed young people. The business grew to $5 million. Our success story got covered on TV. After the TV show aired, we were bombarded with calls from all sorts of people. We got orders, questions, offers for deals, and requests for interviews. Both the company phone and my personal cell phone wouldn't stop ringing. So when I got a call from an unknown number, I answered without thinking. To my surprise, it was my brother. I figured he must have seen the TV feature and heard about my success. But without much of a hello, he said, "I'm thinking of starting a business. Can you lend me some money?" "Excuse me, absolutely not," I replied firmly, feeling even more resolute. I coldly rejected his request and hung up. But he called again. "Stop arguing and give me the money. If a woman like you can start a business and make money, I'm sure I can do it too," he shouted relentlessly. "That's not how someone asking for a loan should act," I responded, baffled by his confidence. It was ironic because he was the one who had called me a stranger. Just a simple farmer. Ignoring his request, I asked something that had been bothering me, by the way, who decided not to tell me about the move. Obviously it was me, my wife. "She's a city girl, you know," he replied. "The moment I mentioned you, she suggested we cut ties. So that was the reason I didn't want to hear more, so I hung up and blocked his number." It seemed like my brother's wife, whom I'd never met, had a similar attitude to my brother and parents. Realizing that my brother had seen me on TV probably meant my parents had too. A few hours later, I received another call from an unknown number. But it turned out to be my father. "Why are you in charge? Did you take a man's job?" he demanded. "Well, both John and my father-in-law are deeply involved in the farming business, so it's only natural. In fact, large-scale consolidation has become advantageous for somewhat larger farms. My father-in-law is the president of the local agricultural association, and John has incorporated his share as an in-law and is now the president of that corporation," I explained. Perhaps my explanation convinced him because then he asked, "Why haven't you been in touch?" Feeling stunned, I replied, "You're the one who disowned me. I'm ending this conversation now," and I hung up and blocked his number. A few minutes later, my mother called. "Why won't you lend money to your brother? You're making $500 million a year, aren't you? Send money home. We're your real family. Have you forgotten all we've done for you, raising you up? Give us at least $300 million or at least $250 million, my mother demanded aggressively. Even though the business earns $500 million, that's the total revenue after paying for expenses and employee salaries. I barely have anything left over. I exaggerated a bit, and my mother instantly shot back, "You're lying. That can't be true," feeling increasingly frustrated. I couldn't believe my mother's persistent demands for money. I wondered if she had any shame. "I'm not going to send you any money, whether I have it or not. We're strangers," I told her firmly before hanging up and blocking her number. I thought that would be the end of it, but I was mistaken. My parents, my brother, and his wife, whom I never met before, suddenly showed up uninvited at my in-laws' house. "Hey, Amy, guess what? I'm taking back the disowment," my father announced. I was shocked at their desperation for money. My mother-in-law couldn't believe what was happening. Even my father-in-law and her were clearly uncomfortable, glaring at my parents in silence. The employees around us had gathered, looking shocked at my parents. My brother seemed to realize he wasn't welcome either. "We're the real family, connected by blood. We deserve a share of your earnings too," he insisted. The woman with him, presumably his wife, nodded along in agreement. I was livid. "No, that's not how it works. Even though we share blood, there's been no emotional connection. You treated me like a stranger and abandoned me," I said, feeling the old wounds of being rejected by my biological family reopening. Tears threatened to spill again. Just then, John came and stood by my side. "Amy is part of our family now. Even if you haven't claimed her, we're perfectly happy without you." "Please leave," he said firmly, defending me. The employees joined in, criticizing my parents together. "We're with Amy. How dare you?" they exclaimed in unison. As I thought, this is my true family. I felt a deep sense of happiness. But my brother's anger was growing. Shut up, you country bumpkins. You're all uneducated trash," he raged. But John calmly responded, "Actually, both my father and I are Ivy League graduates, and Amy graduated from a prestigious agricultural university, revealing our educational background." "What? With degrees from top universities, why are you farming?" My brother exclaimed in disbelief. Maybe for my brother, graduating from a lower-rank university was his only source of pride, and he likely didn't anticipate being outmatched in terms of education, I thought. Amy and John remained composed as he stated, farming is an honorable profession. We can apply what we've learned in college to it. I couldn't contain my laughter at the absurdity of it all. Brother, you've been bested by John in every way, I chuckled, feeling a sense of relief wash over me. Realizing I had been too fearful of my brother and parents, I spoke up firmly. Let me make this clear one last time. We are strangers now. Pausing briefly, I adopted a polite tone. Therefore, I cannot lend or give money to strangers. Please leave. If you cause trouble or act violently, I will call the police and take legal action. I asserted our separation unequivocally. My in-laws and husband moved closer to me, ready to shield me from any harm my parents and brother might try to inflict. I was deeply touched, feeling genuinely cared for. The employees also joined in, shouting at my parents, "Get out of here. Go home." My parents, brother, and sister-in-law left with resentment in their eyes, unable to argue further and only able to retreat. Later, I learned that my cousin, brother, and parents tried to get rich quickly by starting a business with borrowed money instead of asking me. But their arrogance led to a major failure. Now they're on the brink of bankruptcy. But I've cut ties with them, and I have no intention of getting involved anymore. As for me, my work is thriving, and I'm surrounded by my true family, supportive in-laws, a loving husband, and wonderful children. I'll cherish each day, enjoying the happiness of life.
Today, I traveled to the reunion via train. We were going to have a drink there, so I ran into Brandon, a guy who used to always make fun of me. "You don't even own a car, man. For someone as impoverished as you, is that really a pipe dream?" Brandon laughed out and remarked, "Well, even if you had one, a broke guy like you could only afford a clunker, so you couldn't show up here in one anyway." At that moment, his attitude truly annoyed me. It's just not funny to judge someone without knowing anything about them. He then continued to pursue me while boasting about himself. To be honest, I was tired of him. Then a fancy limousine arrived in the parking area of the venue. A stunning woman stepped out as it came to a stop in front of the entryway. She gave me a respectful greeting as soon as our eyes locked. Kevin Smith is my name. Out of my 5 siblings, I am the middle child. My siblings are a younger sister and brother, as well as an older sister and brother. Mom smiled softly all the time. Regardless of our whims, she always responded or gave advice without ever raising her voice. Dad drives a cab. He had to retire from his job at a vehicle repair shop because of a back ailment. Taking advantage of his commercial driving license, Dad, who worked in the automotive industry and liked vehicles, moved to his car shop as a driver. My father had a big influence on me, and I became really interested in cars. I used to play with die-cast cars that I acquired from kids' events or toy vehicles that my dad obtained from customers. I also looked for automobile encyclopedias that my brother had given me, which taught me about different kinds of cars. I would jot down the facts and forms I had committed to memory on school notebooks and flyers. Mr. Thompson, my teacher, used to reprimand me by stating, "Your notebook appears to be a catalog. Quit drawing. It's a happy recollection." Dad brought home vehicle catalogs, which gave me the most excitement. He still had a lot of contacts from his previous job, and he would sometimes bring home catalogs of the vehicles they dealt with. I was always excited to see the new car models created for each season and the cover designs that changed with the seasons. However, this seemed to worry my dad a little. "I'm sorry I can just give you catalogs, Kevin. Please let me know if you would want comics or any other toys. I'll make arrangements to get them for you." "Really? I'm all right. I really like these." "Is that so?" By any measure, Our family wasn't wealthy. We were a family of 7 after all. For a month, the costs of food and schooling alone were high. My older siblings gave me their clothes and school supplies. I could only obtain a new toy on my birthday, even if I wanted one. I once begged my parents for a driving game because I really wanted one. But they stated, regretfully, "Sorry, we'd love to get it for you, but things are tight right now," looking distressed. I was at my most selfish age, so when my request was turned down, I sulked for around 3 days. However, as I got older, I began to comprehend the circumstances facing our family. With that knowledge, I was able to partially comprehend my parents' emotions when they had to turn down our requests. I began to appreciate my parents' unending generosity at that point, and I gradually stopped being so demanding. The school I attended was a small one with only 2 classes per grade. Standout individuals were recognized by all students, just like us, the Smith siblings. As a result, we were often teased. But my older siblings, being well-grounded individuals, managed to turn such negative comments into jokes or simply brushed them off skillfully. My younger brother was the biggest and strongest among us, so he countered such ridicule with his physical presence and assertiveness. Perhaps because of that, he was respected by those around us. He became what you might call the leader of the pack. My youngest sister, being raised as the baby of the family, was the best at making requests. All 4 of us spoiled her endlessly. Because of this, she became a beloved figure among her peers, adored by everyone in her grade. Before I knew it, she had mastered the art of charm and had won over many allies. That's why no one dared to criticize us for being a family of 7 siblings. As for me, I ended up becoming the main target of teasing. I lacked strength and didn't have the courage to confront or change my surroundings. That's why the verbal arrows meant for my siblings ended up being directed at me. But in such times, my older siblings always protected me. It was a great joy for me back then. Yet with every instance, I felt a pathetic sense of powerlessness for not being able to do anything on my own. There was a guy in my class named Brandon. He was born into a wealthy family and could get almost anything he wanted. His life was the complete opposite of mine. Brandon, knowing my love for cars, would always boast about the cars his parents owned. "You probably don't have this at your place, or you must be jealous, right?" He would say things like that, each remark hurting me. In addition, he brought high-quality toys like die-cast cars, model kits, and RC cars to school. Things that were of a much higher quality than the cheap ones I owned. He would boast about them to me and our classmates. He let others handle them freely, but he would never let me. Whenever I asked, he'd always say, "I don't want your poverty to rub off on me." However, it's against the rules to bring such items to school, yet he would show them off to everyone, avoiding the teacher's gaze. Then one day, he went too far. "Check this out," he boasted, holding up a limited edition model that even enthusiasts would envy in front of everyone. A piece worth a considerable amount on the market. He had brought such an item to school. Naturally, everyone was impressed, expressing their envy. They all handled the model, admiring it, but of course, he didn't let me touch it. After school, an incident occurred. The limited edition model was missing, vanished without a trace. Brandon started causing a commotion in the classroom over it. "You did it, didn't you?" He was quick to suspect me, the first one he accused. Naturally, I denied it, but he wouldn't listen to a word I said. He just bombarded me with insults. Then, our teacher, Mr. Thompson, walked into the classroom. Mr. Thompson asked the class, "What happened here?" After understanding the situation, Mr. Thompson came over to Brandon and me to hear both sides of the story. I was insisting on my innocence, while Brandon, on the other hand, was unilaterally placing the blame on me. Mr. Thompson seemed to sense something and let out a deep sigh. "I understand the situation," he said, "so let's all start looking for it. Something that valuable can't just disappear." Everyone remaining in the classroom began searching for a while. Nothing was found. But as the day was about to end, one of the boys came forward, looking guilty in front of Mr. Thompson. He admitted, "I'm sorry. I hid it," and immediately went to apologize to Brandon as well. Brandon forgave him easily, as if it were a minor matter. Despite having been so harsh with me, I was filled with surprise and anger. But at that moment, I couldn't say anything. Mr. Thompson was still a young teacher with a flexible mindset and a broad perspective, always treating us students fairly. He kindly said to me, "You got caught up in quite a mess." Those words were a strong stimulus for me, who had been continually blamed without the usual support of my older siblings. Tears streamed down my face as I told Mr. Thompson in broken words, "I was suspected because I'm poor. It can't be helped, but it becomes harder and harder when everyone looks at me like that." Not being believed was painful. Mr. Thompson gently patted my head and said softly, "It's better to speak up against unfairness. That courage will be the key to saving your heart. Besides, you're not alone. There are always people who believe in you, just like I believe in you, Kevin." Those words stayed with me deeply. Knowing there were people who believed in me, I felt reassured that I had someone to rely on. From the next day, I was more open about expressing my thoughts. As days passed, I became more outgoing. Being honest and speaking my mind led to less teasing about being one of 7 siblings. However, Brandon's attitude remained unchanged. I continued to assert my dislikes without backing down. When he became too persistent, I made it a point to ignore him. Eventually, Brandon would walk away, clearly not amused. I learned that hiding my feelings wouldn't convey them to others. By actively speaking up, I could change from who I used to be. Feeling hopeful, I started engaging more with my classmates. Gradually, as I made various friends, Brandon's harassment stopped. 20 years have passed, and I've grown. Speaking up has become a part of who I am, enabling me to connect with many. Now I'm engaged in a job that benefits from my network. Around that time, I got a call from my parents. There was a letter for me in the mailbox. I had my parents check it, and it was an invitation to a reunion. The main event was to celebrate the 20-year milestone and unearth a time capsule we buried in 5th grade. Initially, I fought it, but when I heard that Mr. Thompson, who had always been kind to me, would also attend, I decided to participate immediately. However, my current workload made attending challenging, but I began to strategize, thinking I could make it work by rearranging some commitments. I now lived far from my hometown, away from my family home. I thought getting to the venue would be difficult, but it was conveniently near my current residence. I can make it if I finish my work in the morning, I thought, with that last concern resolved. My plans were set. Choosing a venue for the after-party, which I had also pondered, was easy. I promptly booked a spot online. The reunion took place in a spacious pub reserved entirely for us. Since the invitation mentioned drinking, I opted for the train over driving. The highlight was the unveiling of the time capsule. The organizer had retrieved it from our elementary school and brought it to the reunion. We were to open it together on Signal. Upon arrival, old friends welcomed me warmly. Despite nearly 2 decades, I recognized everyone. They had matured well, displaying a charm almost beyond recognition from our elementary days. I enjoyed catching up and reminiscing with them. At that moment, a notably lively group entered. In the midst of them was Brandon, eagerly talking about the luxury car he now owned. Brandon's car is stunning. I've never seen such a luxury vehicle before. Me too, his friends exclaimed. Typical Brandon, always so extravagant. His friends, essentially a fan club, were relentless in their adulation. Brandon himself was roaring with laughter, visibly basking in the attention. His entrance and style dominated the room, capturing everyone's gaze. Today, Brandon was dressed out like a celebrity. His suit paired with ostentatious gold accessories and a watch that glittered with diamonds, unabashedly flaunting his wealth. His followers erupted in cheers, their enthusiasm unmistakable. "Really well. I'll take you all for a spin later," he announced with the flamboyance of a showman. His followers erupted in cheers again, their excitement undiminished. Intrigued by the luxury car that had sparked such a buzz, I looked outside the venue. There, prominently displayed at the entrance, was a vivid red luxury sports car. Its presence was like a tomato on top of a sundae. Well, it was out of place, to say the least. Observing the car in disbelief, Brandon came over to me, and true to form, he immediately taunted me. Granted, I hadn't dressed lavishly for the event. My watch was modest, and my suit was a standard charcoal gray. My shoes were the usual leather, making me resemble the typical office worker seen downtown. Hence, his jabs seemed unwarranted, leaving me bemused. "You're a car enthusiast, right? How did you arrive today, huh?" he asked. "As usual, I took the train," I answered. At this, Brandon burst out in laughter. "You don't own a car. Having one is just an unattainable dream for someone as poor as you. Even if you did, a guy like you could only afford a beater, so showing up in one wouldn't be an option, right?" Brandon jeered, his laughter booming. His arrogance was infuriating. Making assumptions without knowledge is one thing, but finding them amusing is entirely another. Engaging him would only escalate the situation, so as before, I responded ambiguously and removed myself from the conversation. However, throughout the reunion, he followed me about constantly boasting. Eventually, even I grew weary of his relentless self-promotion. Initially annoyed, my encounter with my former teacher provided a welcome distraction, and Brandon eventually drifted away. I savored the time catching up with Mr. Thompson, discussing the past and present. This exchange lifted my mood, making me anticipate the after-party. But then, the cacophony returned. One of Brandon's entourage seemed to be begging for a ride in his car. Assuming Brandon was revving in the limelight, I glanced his way. Regrettably, our eyes met. "Oh, are you jealous too? You should just admit it if you are. But I wouldn't let someone like you touch it anyway. Don't want my precious car catching your poverty stink." Embracing his two sidekicks, standing beside him with both arms, he added, "But hey, if you grovel and lick my shoes, maybe I'll consider it. Miss this chance, and you'll never get a ride." To be honest, comments like that made me feel more contempt than anger. I pied him and chuckled dismissively. Just then, someone else called out, "Hey, check that out." "What is that?" I've never seen such a car in real life. People near the entrance were whispering excitedly. Curious, I went to see what the fuss was about. There stood a limousine, even more out of place than Brandon's car. "Hey, Brandon, man, you're incredible. Did you arrange this car too?" One of his followers looked at him with admiration, but Brandon himself seemed confused. "No, I don't know anything about this," Brandon muttered under his breath. Then the people around him suddenly looked puzzled and started looking around, wondering who it could be. Just then, a beautiful woman stepped out of the limousine. Upon spotting me, she smiled and nodded in greeting. "Mr. Smith, sorry to keep you waiting. I've arranged the car for the after-party as you instructed," she said. "Thanks," I replied. Our exchange made my classmates do a double take. Then, a friend from the organizing committee came over and thanked me. "Kevin, thanks for arranging this. This was possible because of my current job. I'm the president of a luxury car rental company," I said. My friends who had kept in touch knew this. This time, I was asked if I could plan an impactful after-party, so I decided to offer a limousine at a discounted rate. We planned to head to the after-party venue in the limousine after the main event. To ensure enjoyment during the ride, I stocked the limousine fridge with various drinks and snacks. That should be impactful enough. The friend organizing the event explained the situation to everyone there. From different parts of the crowd, voices could be heard saying, "Kevin is a president. That must be some kind of joke. Can't be real, like the organizer." A few friends were in the know about me, but it seemed most were not. Amid all the attention, Brandon approached me. You're the president of a rental car company. That's not true, right?" "It's no lie," I replied. "With my line of work, I've seen so many luxury cars, I'm practically jaded. I think they're fine for an occasional spin, but for everyday use, a regular car suits me just fine." With a relaxed smile, I grinned at Brandon. At that, he seemed to flush with frustration, his face turning beet red. Not only the car, but everyone was also captivated by the woman who had stepped out of the limousine. Noticing the many gazes on her, she addressed the classmates, saying, "I am serving as Kevin's secretary." The crowd, initially stunned, quickly gathered around her. "You're so beautiful. You must be great at your job. How long have you been Kevin's secretary? Frankly, what do you think of him? Which university did you graduate from?" Faced with a barrage of questions, the secretary seemed a bit bewildered. So, I decided to set the record straight. "Sorry to spoil the fun, but she's my sister, so back off," I said. "What? Seriously?" everyone exclaimed in surprise. Yes, the woman serving as my secretary is indeed my sister. Known for her charm and for attracting the opposite sex throughout her school years, she's become somewhat of a legend. While she's still as willful as ever on the inside, her outward appearance is undeniably appealing. Thanks to that, when she handles client relations, she's guaranteed to be a great success. She's truly a valuable asset. "By the way, Mr. Smith, about that sports car parked in front of the shop," my sister inquired. "Yes, that's right, but it's not really worth mentioning," I whispered back. However, Brandon must have overheard because he shouted, "What's that? Say it clearly." So, with a sigh, I said loud enough for everyone to hear, "That car. It's a rental, right? It's one of the cars our company rents out, isn't it?" Brandon turned beet red and denied, "That's not true. I bought that car." However, the car had a sticker on the window clearly indicating it was a rental. Anyone familiar would instantly recognize this. It seemed no one else at the venue was aware, so I had kept quiet about it. Upon realizing Brandon's car was a rental, his followers quickly changed their tune. In disbelief, they said, "So it was just borrowed?" What a letdown. They seriously walked away from him. Then they began to prepare to leave the venue, getting into the after-party mood. Only my secretary, Brandon, and I were left in the now messy pub. I didn't know what to say to the disheartened Brandon at that moment. He started to mutter various things. He was born an only child into a wealthy family, in stark contrast to me. However, his parents often sacrificed their time because of their wealth and were rarely home. He was given everything he wanted, but he always felt a sense of loneliness. In contrast, I had many siblings. My older brothers and sisters looked out for me, and I had adorable younger siblings. Brandon seemed to envy that. He, too, liked cars and often browsed for catalogs. He wanted to be friends over our shared interest in cars, but never said so because of his pride. He also wanted to apologize for the model incident from the past, but after that event, I stopped interacting with him, which made him anxious. The same went for today. The luxury car, he knew it was out of place, but he wanted to grab the crowd's attention by driving it. I was listening seriously, but my sister wasn't. Upon hearing his confession, she immediately exclaimed, "You? That's creepy." I tried to calm her down, saying, "That's no way to talk about something someone said seriously," but my sister wouldn't stop teasing. "Just because you want attention. Maybe that's fine for kids, but for an adult to say that, it's nothing but creepy. It's like being a stalker." Brandon was visibly shocked by her relentless words. I thought to myself, she went too far. But even as the two of us fell down, my sister continued relentlessly. "If you wanted to make up, You should have just apologized sincerely instead of all this roundabout nonsense. Acting like this for years is just childish and uncool, she said. Brandon looked like he was about to cry, but what my sister said was right. Though I do think she might have gone a bit too far. Sorry for my sister, but she's right. There's a limit to how much you can push your pride. I'm sorry, but I can't see us becoming friends, I told him. Hearing this, Brandon collapsed to his knees, even more devastated. I heard the after-party starting. Where's it at? Mr. Thompson, our former teacher, suddenly appeared amidst the tense atmosphere. You guys arguing like this when you should be capable of mature thought. Honestly, it's a bit disappointing as your teacher, he said. Mr. Thompson, how long have you been listening? I couldn't help but give a small smile. Mr. Thompson laughed heartily. Well, I didn't intend to at first. Then he suddenly became quiet and looked at Brandon with a serious expression. Brandon, a dialogue is about respecting the other person's opinion while expressing your own. You're aware of what you've done up to this point, right? Regardless of your past, you can't erase those facts. So the right to forgive or not lies with Kevin. Just because you apologize doesn't mean you'll be forgiven. It doesn't always work out so conveniently. Although Mr. Thompson's tone was as gentle as possible, his words were stern. He must have given the same guidance to him when he was in elementary school. Brandon began to cry suddenly, perhaps recalling that time. Next, Mr. Thompson looked at me. You become able to express your feelings clearly. People can change. They can grow. I believe you understand that. You might feel unforgivable now, but I hope you can look at it in the long run. To me, both of you are dear former students, he said with a gentle smile. Mr. Thompson's words seemed to slowly seep into my heart. Thanks to his warm influence, I felt like I had more room in my heart. Thanks to that, I was able to think like this. Right now, I might not be able to forgive Brandon. The wounds he inflicted are deep. But if he tries to change and make efforts from now on, perhaps we could become good friends again. In the chilly, heavy, and damp atmosphere of the bar, even in such a situation, Mr. Thompson remained unflappable. Well, that's a fantastic limousine. Does it even have a refrigerator? Riding in such a car must be like a dream. By the way, how many people can it hold? It can hold up to 8 people. Wow, that's amazing. While receiving various explanations from my sister, Mr. Thompson carefully observed the limousine. As I watched Mr. Thompson with amusement, Brandon spoke to me. I'm truly sorry for what I did in the past, and just now. I'll never trouble you again. I won't be so presumptuous as to ask for forgiveness, but if we ever meet again, I hope you'll give us a chance to rebuild our relationship. Well, if we meet again. It's hard to suddenly engage in a friendly conversation with him. But watching someone trying to change makes you want to keep an eye on them. I couldn't help but let out a bittersweet smile mixed with complex feelings. Just before we left the bar, a time capsule opening ceremony was held at the organizer's cue. Everyone counted down, and at the end, the seal was broken. Then everyone took out the items with their names on them. Inside the time capsule with my name was a toy car I used to play with and a letter. Upon opening it, the letter was written in the awkward handwriting of a young boy. It began with, "To my adult self. Are you doing well? Did you get a job related to cars? I'm currently trying to make friends with various people. I've gradually made more friends. Spending time with friends is fun. I've become able to express my feelings, thanks to the words given by Mr. Thompson. Have you forgotten about this? Please make sure to say thank you. Absolutely, absolutely, absolutely do not forget." I couldn't help but laugh after reading the last part. Mr. Thompson, who saw me slowly walk over to him, asked, "Was there something funny?" "W.R. Jess, well, H, please look at this." I showed Mr. Thompson the letter. Then, with a delighted smile, he said, "How nostalgic. You were shy, but you had your childlike moments like this. To Mr. Thompson, I said, "Mr. Thompson, thank you for everything back then. I am who I am today because of you." Hearing this, the others also began to express their gratitude. You helped us create an opportunity to reconcile with friends. I came to love math, which I used to struggle with, and now I'm working my dream job as a surveyor. Thanks to Mr. Thompson's encouragement, I was able to pursue my dreams. My success today is all thanks to you. Thank you. Each of them expressed their gratitude to Mr. Thompson in turn. Though we were all well into adulthood, at that moment, we seemed just like we were back in elementary school. The way we eagerly and happily expressed our feelings was just like when we were kids. I'm the one who should be thankful. Thank you, Mr. Thompson. Looking pleased, Mr. Thompson repeated his words many times. Tears seemed to well up in his eyes. Seeing you all grown up into fine adults makes me truly happy. I'm so glad to be able to spend time together like this. Truly, this is a teacher's greatest reward. Mr. Thompson's words moved many of his former students to tears. Amidst this emotional atmosphere, applause broke out from somewhere, filling the bar. The reunion, 20 years in the making, ended with a booming applause. A lot of time has passed since the reunion ended. If there's one thing that has changed in my daily life since that day, it's that there's an addition photo in my room. In it, Brandon and I are both smiling. We're standing in front of cars we each bought with our own money, arms around each other's shoulders. Becoming friends with him, despite our past grievances, was also thanks to Mr. Thompson. Every morning when I see this photo, I'm reminded that people can change. At the same time, I resolve to live my life without forgetting Mr. Thompson's words that come back to me repeatedly.